Around 7 a.m. on January 30th, 2008, Raleigh, North Carolina police received multiple reports of a body on the side of Interstate 540. The victim, an unidentified black woman, had multiple stab wounds to the chest, said Captain Cameron Lillyquist of Wake County Sheriff's Office. It appeared that somebody had put just a lot of anger into the offense. Evidence that the body had been dragged suggested that the victim had been killed somewhere else. An hour after law enforcement arrived, Darren Curtis approached a deputy at the perimeter of the crime scene. He said he'd filed a missing persons report on his 21-year-old wife, Latrese Curtis, adding that he found her Nissan Sentra about 150 yards away. He said that he looked inside the vehicle and a large amount of blood in there, said Lillyquist. Officials identified the victim as Latrese Curtis through Darren's photos. Her father, Sherman Jones, described her as a daddy's girl and a go-getter. She and Darren eloped in the spring of 2007. Based on blood in the Nissan, it was pretty obvious that the attack started inside Latrese's vehicle, said Lillyquist. The car was towed to the station for processing, Donnie Harrison, now retired from Wake County Sheriff's Office, told Sons of the South. Like her husband, Latrese was in college. She was studying accounting at University of North Carolina Central. Darren had spoken to her around 10 p.m. the night before as she was leaving the library, according to investigators. He fell asleep around 11 p.m. and discovered his wife was missing in the morning. He tried calling her as he had to head to work. But on the way there, he saw her car, prompting him to return home and report her missing. Before he returned to the crime scene, he checked their joint cell phone account. Darren found and called a number he didn't recognize that was shown to have taken place late on January 29th. A man answered who said he went to school with Latrese before ending the call. When he was formally interviewed, Darren consented to being fingerprinted, DNA swabbed, and photographed. Because Latrese had been repeatedly stabbed, detectives looked for cuts and scratches. They checked him for any injuries and defensive wounds, said Jennifer Reimer, former prosecutor for Wake County DA's office. They didn't find any. Investigators obtained warrants to search the Curtis residence and vehicle. The bulk of the forensic evidence came from Latrese's car, said Reimer. The steering wheel was swabbed for DNA. As detectives tried to identify the man that Darren spoke with on the phone, there was a break in the case. A state trooper had located a vehicle around 1:30 a.m. on January 30th, very close to where Latrese was found, according to Lillyquist. Before the trooper could investigate further, he had to leave the scene to handle another call. The car was found to belong to Robert Reeves, a pastor at a church in Durham. At the same time, detectives figured out that the man who'd spoken briefly with Darren was Stephen Randolph, an NCCU student. Randolph agreed to come in to be questioned, provided he could bring his mentor and roommate, Robert Reeves. On February 1st, Randolph told Lillyquist that he'd met Latrese in a class. She had said she was separated from her husband. Their relationship became intimate. He'd last seen her on January 29th. He said the two of them had sexual intercourse at about 10 o'clock, said Lillyquist. After she left, Randolph went to friend's home, where he played video games. Latrese later called him to discuss their relationship, according to detectives. Randolph returned home at 1:30 a.m. The next morning, he got a call from an unknown man around 9 a.m. Randolph said he first heard of Latrese's murder on the news. In another interrogation room, Reeves claimed he had no idea why his car would have been on the I-540 at 1:30 a.m. He said he'd gone to church the night before and then home. Reeves told officials that when he met Randolph at a car wash, the student was going through hard times, according to Reimer. Then, the minister shocked detectives with an admission that came out of left field. Reeves said he approached Stephen about starting an escort service. He said he asked Stephen to pull out his genitalia, said Lillyquist, adding that the bishop claimed he needed measurements. Randolph backed up what Reeves said. He added that Reeves grabbed him, said Lillyquist. After the incident, Reeves no longer charged Randolph rent. A warrant was obtained to collect DNA and fingerprints and to photograph Reeves' body. He had fresh cuts, scrapes, and scratches, which he claimed he got when moving furniture, said Reimer. Randolph was fingerprinted, swabbed for DNA, and photographed. He was found to have no cuts or injuries. DNA samples of Darren, Randolph, and Reeves were sent to the crime lab for analysis and comparison to evidence from Latrese's car. The autopsy report showed that Latrese had been stabbed nearly 40 times. Reported. At the same time, Reeves' alibi was crumbling. No fellow churchgoers could verify that he was there, said Lillyquist. Reeves was charged with murder. Investigators dug deep to find the link between Latrese and Reeves, as well as a motive for the brutal stabbing. When DNA reports came back, Randolph and Darren were not a match and were cleared as suspects. Reeves' results told a different story. He was a match. The chances of it not being Robert Reeves was 1 in millions, said Reimer. The community responded in disbelief. He was well regarded and well respected in the church community, said Thomas I. McDonald, staff writer, Raleigh News and Observer. It sounded like it would have been so out of character for him. Investigators learned that Reeves had a history of sexual misconduct in South Carolina and Brooklyn, New York, involving minor males. Randolph was re-interviewed. He recalled getting a threatening call from an unknown male and having his tires slashed. The call was linked to Reeves. It opened up a Jekyll and Hyde story to him, said Reimer. Reeves had an obvious attraction to Stephen Randolph, said Lillyquist. But it wasn't mutual. He felt Latrese was in the way and he wanted to get rid of this obstruction, added Reimer. George Kelly, Reeves' attorney, poked a hole in the theory, according to Sins of the South. This case became about lust, he said, noting that Randolph had no interest in his client, so killing Latrese would have no benefit for him. Kelly also tried to discredit DNA evidence. Because Latrese was in Reeves' home, she could have picked up his DNA from a doorknob and transferred it to her steering wheel. In September 2009, the trial began. Reeves' own sister became a key witness. Her testimony showed he had no alibi. Prosecutors laid out their theory, suggesting Reeves followed Latrese, violently stabbed her, and dragged her to the side of the highway. Reeves chose not to testify on his own behalf and was ultimately found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole. Reported.